Hello, everybody. Having a little technical difficulty here. My microphone wouldn't work, and so this is why we're kind of a couple of days late. Anyway, today I'm going to read episode 6 of From the Blue Pendant, which is book 1 of the Sackville Hotel trilogy. And here is the book, the cover for you. And of course, if you would prefer to catch up with your own reading, the book is available on all online retail stores and in several chapters in Canada, but certainly Amazon carries it if you're interested in buying it. So without further ado, let's start with episode 6, which is called The Desk Incident. Monday morning was tense. The hotel was full, and many of the guests had brought their own, often demanding servants, which always caused friction. Mrs. Banks had one anxious eye on Mr. Pickles' office door and the other on the difficult guest servants, especially the ladies' maids, who would try to take advantage of the hotel staff. Chef screamed at Bill about meddling servants and impossible food requests. Anna busied herself setting the staff breakfast table, trying to quell her nerves. In 2 hours' time, Mr. Pickle would know her desk had been moved. Taking a deep breath for confidence, she vowed to arrest his ardor and stand firm. Mr. Litton arrived early, relieving Anna of the reception desk duties and enabling her to answer the constant stream of telephone inquiries. Trivial questions about dining times and maid service. The hour chimed from the grandfather clock and filtered through the baize door as it opened. It was precisely 8 o'clock, and Mr. Pickles had entered his office. She waited for the office door to open. Nothing happened. The keen early risers started telephoning about the historical sites of Bexhill. The Sackville Hotel catered to the wealthy and privileged, who had a macabre fascination with the bad boys of Bexhill, the notorious smugglers. Tobacco and alcohol smuggling from France to the Sussex coast was known to have been a lucrative business for the village during the early part of the 1800s. Other guests were more interested in renting deck chairs or bathing huts for a quiet day at the beach. The telephone provided a welcome distraction for Anna, but every time she glanced at her desk, she stuttered her answers to the callers and turned towards Mr. Pickles' office, almost losing the connection and having to repeat herself. Her anxiety was galloping, while the seconds ticked by in slow motion. First came a muffled, "Miss Neal?" Mr. Litton looked over at Anna with a nod and reassuring smile. "You are safe." The door vibrated and Mr. Pickles' voice exploded. "Miss Neal, what is this all about? You moved your desk." Mr. Pickles glared at the position of Anne's desk. "Miss Neal, you will return your desk to my office immediately." Red blotches began to erupt on his neck. Anne gulped, fear deafening her ears. She steadied her voice and said, "I prefer my desk here, Mr. Pickles. I'm closer to the telephone exchange, and I can see the reception desk should Mr. Litton need my assistance." The red blotches multiplied at an alarming rate. One erupted on the end of his pointy nose, and then they began popping up under his comb-over. Anna couldn't contain herself any longer and had to stare at her feet while she stifled a giggle, trying to remove the nervous grin that had planted itself on her face. "What is so amusing, Mr. Neal?" Before she could answer, he roared, "Are you disobeying me? Move your desk this minute!" Anna quickly composed herself and stood as tall as her 5'4" frame would allow. "Uncle Bertie telephoned yesterday. He asked after your well-being and bid me to send his regards." Her hands were behind her back with her fingers tightly crossed, hoping the lie did not show. I was telling him how much more convenient it would be to have my desk near the telephone exchange, and he thought you would agree. Mrs. Banks agrees. Mr. Lytton is pleased that it will allow me to attend to the guests more quickly, should he be rushed. Anna had no idea where these words were coming from. She could say no more, her amusement having turned back into fear. Her knees trembled and her head spun. Mr. Pickles was scarlet, his body rigid. Anna detected a slight flinch followed by a shadow of fear in his cold black eyes. He turned abruptly and slammed the office door behind him without saying another word. "Well done, Miss Neale." The words came from Mrs. Banks, who, unbeknownst to Anna, had joined Mr. Lytton at the reception desk. The talk of Anna's desk incident, as it was referred to by the staff, took some time to settle down. Although the staff was not told why Anna's desk had been moved, the rumours were rampant, and those who had known Edith's story soon made the connection. Anna refused to discuss the issue with anyone, which unfortunately caused resentment from some of the staff. Mr. Pickles became vengeful towards everyone, not just Anna. He made no more appropriate advances towards her, but she did have to endure his ferret eyes leering at her when she took shorthand. She was aware that the anger he felt towards her for humiliating him would never dissipate. It was only a matter of time before he would reap his revenge. Outwardly, Anna recovered from the incident with confidence and maturity, but inwardly the scars were deep. Her trust had been violated, and it was going to take her a long time to recover. She found herself pulling away from Bill. He asked questions, wanting details. It would be humiliating to look into Bill's beautiful eyes and see ridicule and mistrust. She couldn't bear the thought that Bill might think she had encouraged the evil man. No matter how hard she tried, deep inside, she could not shake the thought that it was her fault. How could she explain to Bill that at this moment in time she couldn't trust any man, even him? She constantly sensed those dirty fingers creeping along her blouse. It wasn't fair to Bill, and she knew it, but she still felt the shame. Mrs. Banks and Sophie, the only two people she had confided in, tried to reassure her that the shame belonged to Mr. Pickles. Alex didn't ask questions. He avoided the situation, teasing her about having been promoted from the back stage of Mr. Pickles' office to the front of the house. This bantering suited Anna. It was easy to be with Alex. By the end of September 1913, most of the summer guests had vacated the Sackville and returned to London, leaving the resident guests and a few stragglers. Lady Thornton didn't leave until mid-October. On the day before her departure to London, Anna spent extra time finishing the last of her correspondence. "I shall miss your company," Lady Thornton said, staring out of the French windows, closed against the autumn chill. Anna stood up and moved to her side, following her stare and pointing out to sea. "Look, there's a large grey ship in the English Channel." "Yes, I believe it's the new battleship, HMS Queen Elizabeth. She was launched from Portsmouth only yesterday. There's been much in the newspaper about the Royal Navy's new battleship, and I think there is more to come." "Battleship?" Anna repeated, envisioning the sea full of cannon-fighting ships. "Does that mean war in Europe?" "Nothing to worry about," Lady Thornton said, with a strange wariness in her expression. "Europeans tend to be temperamental. Germany is squabbling with her neighbours again, and, well," she paused, "Britain is obsessed with protecting her coastline. The Irish Home Rule situation is far more worrying. Now there's a strong possibility of civil war." That was the first time Anna became aware of the tension building in Europe. She'd heard guests talk and the staff gossip. There were stories in the newspaper and much speculation about the unrest in Ireland, but only a little about Europe, and much of that was social gossip about the various royals, both in Europe and at home. Europe was so far away it would hardly affect Britain, Anna thought, and certainly not in her world here in Bexhill. However, whatever the reason, a battleship in the Channel was ominous. During the quietest time of the year, October to May, the Sackville employed a skeleton staff. At busy times, the workload was heavy, but mostly it afforded more free time in the evenings and an extra day or half-day off for the permanent staff. The staff dining hall became a regular meeting place and resulted in a kinship between the foursome. Sophie had joined the threesome. Companionship was the key to surviving winter in a dull, dreary, and bitterly cold seaside town. The blithe life that had been sucked out of the buildings and streets, leaving only shadows of the summer gone by. The sea swell rolled dark and grey, anticipating the next storm. Leaden grey clouds, heavy with moisture, moved sluggishly across the sky, disappearing into the swelling sea. There were only more clouds to follow. Some dark and black ones would open with torrents of rain. The howling northwest gales brought thick rain, driving sleet, and sometimes cold, blinding snow. The attic bedrooms were freezing cold, and Sophie and Anna's room was the coldest. Ice formed lace patterns on the window, the water froze in the washstand, and the wind penetrated through the roof into every corner of the room. Getting undressed was swift, and thick flannel replaced thin cotton nightgowns. Anna was grateful for the soft woolen blanket her mother had sent, but in the worst of the winter the weight of the heavy horsehair blanket provided much-needed extra warmth. Both Anna and Sophie pulled the covers over their heads, their feet resting on ceramic hot water bottles. Too cold to talk through chattering teeth, they shivered under the blankets until they were finally warm enough to fall asleep. The staff dining room was always kept cosy and warm, with a flaming fire in the grate and plenty of hot tea, coffee, or cocoa on the dresser. Any spare evening time was spent huddled around the fire, chatting or reading, and sometimes playing games or cards. Anna spent much of her time reading. Mrs. Banks loaned her Rudyard Kipling's books. She and Bill swapped books and spent many hours discussing authors and titles. On one such evening, Bill, sitting on one side of the fireplace reading, crossed his legs and placed his book, Plain Tales from the Hills, a collection of Kipling's early stories, on his knee. He stared affectionately at Anna. If she had been looking, she would have seen how he yearned to touch her, but she seemed oblivious to his attention. She was reading the novel, Kim. Her feet tucked underneath her skirts, she rocked slightly, her wayward curls bouncing gently to the rhythm of the rocking chair. Bill stood up and picked up the poker to stir the fire and add more coal. Anna closed her book and said, "The poverty in India makes me sad. I don't understand it. I don't remember Uncle Bertie talking about it." Anna's innocence was endearing, her naivety utterly charming. He smiled tenderly. "There's poverty everywhere, and it's not always visible. I think you have to see a country with your own eyes. There are some terrible places in Edinburgh and London, but most travellers don't see that side of the city. Bexhill was designed as a seasonal home for the privileged and is quite sheltered from poverty." Anna had noticed his tender look. She felt his warmth, his gentleness, and she knew how much he cared for her, and she desperately wanted to reciprocate, but she couldn't. Not just yet. But the memories were fading. Bill smiled, and for the first time in weeks she returned his smile, and he saw a glimpse of the old Anna. He stepped over to her and gently brushed a curl from her forehead. And this time she didn't flinch. "Anna, I have something to say." Anna opened her mouth to speak, and Bill gently pressed his fingers against her lips. "Please, Anna, let me say what I have to say." I love you with all my heart. Will you marry me? Anna's face did not tell him what he wanted to hear. He quickly added, It doesn't have to be now, you can wait. I'm a patient man. Once I'm a chef, we can travel. We could go to India. I'll find work in big hotels, and I'll look after you and... Anna put her hand up to stop him. Bill, no, it can't happen. I don't want to get married. You are my best friend. Please don't spoil that. Anna's mind flashed back to bulging trousers and creepy, dirty fingers. She wasn't worthy of Bill. Bill crumpled into the chair. I don't understand. You're slipping away from me. Is it Alex? No, of course not. Why would you think that? She protested, perhaps too strongly. She couldn't deny she enjoyed Alex's light-hearted company. Believe me, I don't want to marry. You know that domestic life terrifies me. Travelling to India excites me, but not as a wife. Lady Thornton's words, It's not easy for a woman to travel alone, contradicted her rationale. She felt pity for Bill. His disappointment showed in his slumped shoulders. Wanting to soften the blow, she added, Perhaps in a couple of years, by the time you are chef, maybe things will be different. But not now. He didn't answer. His shoulders rounded, slowly taking measured steps. He mumbled, Good night, Anna, and walked out of the room. Anna scrutinized the coals as they turned to orange embers. Her thoughts drifted from Bill to Alex, travel to marriage. And what did she really want? The grandfather clock chimed midnight, and she wearily climbed the stairs to her room. Sophie was already sleeping. December brought life back into the hotel. The Christmas tree in the lobby stood 2 stories high, every branch laden with glass baubles, red bows, and twinkling tinsel. Every evening, Christmas carols filled the air. The guests joined the choir with the popular hymns and the chorus of others. The halls hummed with Christmas spirit. Chef prepared traditional Christmas fare, pork pie and capon, sweetmeats, mince pies, brandy-soaked fruit cake, buttery shortbread, candied fruits, and much more. The pantries overflowed, as did the wine cellars. Christmas at home in Rugby paled when compared to the abundance of the Sackville, but no amount of grandeur could replace the love and excitement of Mother's Christmas. She felt strange not to be at home. Christmas in the hotel was lavish, but different and impersonal. She missed Charlie and Lou, guessing what might be in gift boxes. However, looking after a hotel full of guests with a skeleton staff left no time to reminisce, and she was soon caught up in the festivities. By the 6th of January, Little Christmas, and traditionally the day the Christmas decorations were packed away for another year, most guests had scurried back to London. The inclement and unpredictable stormy weather did not encourage long stays. The Sackville quickly returned to its winter quiet, much to the relief of the exhausted staff. Saturday afternoon, the first free time since Christmas, the foursome planned a trip to the new cinema. But that was not to be. Mother Nature boiled up a raging storm, the wind so strong it could blow the strongest man from his feet. The angry, turbulent waves broke over the promenade and flooded the streets, taking anything in their path out to sea as they receded. The staff closed, bolted, and secured windows, doors, and hatches. The kitchen, laundry room, and storage areas were vulnerable to flooding, especially the cellar. Anna assisted George in securing the front entrance as the driving rain and sleet forced its way under the portico. The wind rushed through the cracks, rattling the frames with its persistence to get inside. Once the doors were locked and secure, Anna stood watching the storm escalate, invigorated by its fury. Alex came in from the dining room and stood beside her. Storms are powerful to extreme, masters of nature, which man cannot control. There was a strange passion in Alex's voice. She turned to face him and saw a an intense expression of agony. Wanting to ease his distress, she moved closer, but stepped back, sensing she was intruding into a dark and painful place. A piece of debris banged against the glass, and for a split second she expected the glass to break, and her reflexes pushed her back towards Alex. He slid his arms along her shoulders, and she felt every inch tingle with warmth. His mood changed as he gently pulled her towards him, and she rested her head in the hollow of his shoulder. She felt safe, but glancing around the lobby, she pulled away, hoping no one had noticed. "I'm going to the staff dining hall for some tea," she said, to nobody in particular. Entering the hall, she saw that Sophie and Bill were sitting at the table, the chessboard between them. "Bill is teaching me to play chess," Sophie announced proudly. Bill smiled at Sophie. "And she is learning fast. If she keeps this up, she will surpass the teacher." "Chess is boring. I've better things to do," Hannah said, placing her cup on its saucer a little too hard and regretting her sharp words. She poured tea, keeping her back to Sophie and Bill. They were laughing and involved with each other, paying no attention to Anna. She had a strong desire to smash every cup on the Welsh dresser. What was wrong with her? Bill patiently explained the chess pieces to Sophie. His words irritated Anna, and a pain stabbed her inside. She wanted Bill for herself. But, she thought, only a few weeks ago I rejected him. Muddled and confused, her thoughts went from Bill to Alex. What had just happened with Alex in the lobby? She placed her tea at the end of the table and opened her book and pretended to read. Struggling with her emotions and puzzled by her reaction, she searched for answers. Her encounter with Prickly Pickles had left scars that had made her afraid of getting too close, and Bill wanted to get closer. Alex had become more attentive. He teased her and made her laugh. He took her to the theatre. They walked along the beach in the wind, watching the waves crash to the shore. Alex made her feel happy and carefree. It was impossible to be serious around Alex. Alex's voice came from a passageway. "The storm is easing. I think it stopped raining." Anna put her book down and said, "Alex, let's go for a walk in the wind." Leaving Sophie and Bill to their chess game, Anna and Alex set out along the water-soaked promenade, laughing as they splashed like children in the puddles. Anna began running, and Alex chased her. They laughed in the wind until Alex caught up with her, grabbed her, and kissed her full on the lips. She did not stop him. "Alex," and words failed her. He kissed her again and held her, whispering in her ear, "Marry me, Anna." "Alex, stop fooling around. I don't want to marry anyone, not yet." Alex laughed and lifted her off her feet. "One day I will marry you, Anna Neal." They walked back to the hotel in silence. Anna was afraid of falling in love and afraid of losing her chance at independence. She wondered how this could have happened. Friends, Bill and Alex, both in love with her, and her own feelings were in shambles for both men. She didn't want romance, and definitely not marriage. She liked the foursome friendship. A year ago, on this very day, Anna started working at the Sackville. She stood at the reception counter waiting to welcome the guests arriving on the afternoon London train. The front entrance flew open, and in marched Lady Thornton. Her black dress swooshed as she swept the floor, Princess yapping at her bosom as she approached the desk. The black hat, slightly smaller than last year, had no veil and deep lavender flowers, and small, fluffy black feathers had replaced the long black tentacles of prey. Miss Barclay, carrying the birdcage, stood patiently waiting for the lift. "Good afternoon, Lady Thornton. Welcome back to the Sackville," Anna said with formality and affection. "And welcome, Princess." Anna's voice softened as she greeted the Pekingese in Lady Thornton's arms. Lady Thornton signed the register, raised her head, and smiled warmly. "I think Princess is happy to see you, Miss Neal." Suite 305, I presume? The typewriting machine and desk are in place. I'm anxious to start my correspondence. Anna thought her face looked drawn and pale, even paler than she remembered. The lines around her eyes and mouth were deep with anxiety. Yes, Lady Thornton, everything is ready for you. Anna frowned. Are you well, Lady Thornton? Yes, quite well, thank you. Just tired from the journey. Please call if you need anything. She watched the ornate brass gate clang shut, and Lady Thornton disappeared as the lift rose to the 3rd floor. The scene reminded Anna of how she had grown since that spoilt, arrogant young girl, wearing the oversized, completely inappropriate hat, had walked into the Sackville. The season of 1914 was beginning much the same as the previous year, except under Mr. Litton's tutelage and guidance, Anna had mastered her front desk duties with speed and proficiency. Mr. Litton was proud of his assistant. Mr. Pickles remained formal, but even he was aware that Anna's secretarial and organizational abilities were excellent. In spite of the show of appreciation, Anne never let her guard down. Fears of Anna's reprisal had quelled his carnal desires towards her on the outside, but the banal yearning showed in his tiny ferret eyes as they followed her around the lobby and office. On occasion she caught him licking his lips and consciously brushing past her a little too close. Repulsed and terrified, she grappled with the memories, living in fear that he might try again. She suspected she was satisfying his perverse hunger with another unsuspecting female, but she didn't know who. He was clever and cautious. Among Anna's many talents, she had a way of calming irate and unreasonable guests and easily resolving their problems. She never lost her temper and would have the guests smiling and content in a matter of minutes. Mr. Litton admired this skill. Although he was a kind man who took pride in his work, he did have difficulty controlling his temper at times. Saturdays were always the busiest afternoon, but Anna sensed something different about this late June day. A mixture of overly excited and ill-tempered guests alighted from hansom cabs, carriages and automobiles that queued under the portico. Chaos loomed over the lobby and reception desk. Mr. Litton's complexion had a red-purple tinge, a warning sign as he tried to appease a cantankerous lady and gentleman who had had a particularly disagreeable journey. Pretending she needed some assistance, Anna asked, "Mr. Litton, might I ask you to check this booking, please?" "Certainly, Miss Neale, if you would attend to Sir Walter and Lady Rhodes." Anna quietly moved to face Sir Walter. "I understand you have had a very long and tedious journey. I am sure Lady Rhodes is anxious to rest. How can we make you more comfortable?" Sir Walter grunted, standing tall and stiff. His dress uniform likened him to a life-size toy soldier. "Perhaps a bottle of brandy would ease your discomfort, Sir Walter." He still did not reply, but his face lost its severity. He bowed his head slightly towards Anna, which could have been construed as some form of acknowledgment. Lady Rhodes' many chins concertinaed into her short round body and gave the appearance of a barrel topped with an overly decorated flowered hat. Her pursed lips could have secured a cork. Anne placed her hand across her mouth, trying to conceal a wicked giggle. "Lady Rhodes, I shall have our head housemaid bring you some tea, and I'll ask Chef Louis to prepare some fresh scones with strawberries and Devonshire cream. Perhaps you would enjoy Chef's chocolate cake." Anna lowered her voice. "It is one he only makes for special guests." "That is very kind of you, Miss Neale, thank you," Sir Walter said. Anna called the bellboy, instructing him to escort Sir Walter and Lady Rhodes to their suite. Mr. Litton gave Anna a grateful nod. Once the guests were settled, Anna turned to Mr. Litton and said, "What's happening? The guests seem on edge today." "I think the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand is unsettling them, although it is hard to say what impact his death could have on us." Mr. Litton had a keen interest in anything that was military. His father had served in the African Boer War, and there was intense pride and patriotism in his family. Assassination? The words shivered down her spine. How could such a terrible thing happen? Who is he, anyway? Mr. Lytton gave a sigh and spoke quietly. He is the heir apparent to the Austria-Hungarian Empire. Miss Neale, believe me, Prime Minister Asquith is far more concerned about Ireland than any quarrels the Europeans may have with each other. Britain is quite safe, for now. And that brings episode 6 to a conclusion. I hope you enjoyed it. And as I said earlier, if you want to skip ahead, you can read the book. It is available. And I'm happy to say I'm also working on a complete audio version, which is in fact being edited at the moment. If you need any more information, please go to my website, susanajennings.com. Don't forget the A in the middle, susanajennings.com. So thank you for joining me today. I'll see you in a couple of weeks. Happy spring. It's almost here. Bye.